services librarian. So today, Sarah and I will be presenting, and 4 of us will be joining the Q&A session. So next, let me pass the floor to Sarah, and she will be talking about the introduction of this project.
Thank you, Jai-Bei. So next slide whenever you're ready. Thanks. So just a quick overview of this intro session. I'm going to give a brief project overview, talk a little bit about the source of this data, which is a newspaper called the Boston Pilot. And our history expert, Dr. Lehman, can certainly speak more about this in the Q&A if you have questions about it. And then a little bit of an overview of the project goals as well. Next slide. Thank you. So using this data collected from this kind of long-standing data project called Information Wanted, we wanted to demonstrate how students, particularly in the humanities, who might not be familiar with doing data-based scholarship, can use historical data sources in their own research. And to achieve that, we created a number of visualizations and we used a number of digital scholarship tools using a subset of that data because we did not want to use the whole thing for reasons that we can get into. It's over 100 years of data and we wanted to make it somewhat manageable for ourselves. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So a little bit about what Information Wanted actually is. This is a project that's based on a newspaper called the Boston Pilot, which claims to be the longest running Catholic newspaper in the US. And it started in the early 19th century or so. Ads were placed in the paper from family members in Ireland who were seeking information about their family members who had immigrated to the US and also sometimes to Canada as well. Hence the name Information Wanted. Back in the 1970s or 80s, a professor named Ruth-Ann Harris at BC started really doing research into what was actually in these ads and what we might be able to learn about early 19th century immigration to Boston and other parts of the US. And so she actually turned these ads into data by having students enter certain pieces of information into a form, then created a database from that. And for a long time, this was on BC's servers. Ruth-Ann Harris passed away a little while ago, and BC was no longer able to use that data or keep that database up and running. So we thought that instead of keeping a website up and running, we could preserve the data itself and do some more documentation around it so that people could start to use it in their own research. And so our history librarian at the time, Chelsea Rowell, worked with our Irish Studies librarian. We're at Boston College, there's a lot of Irish studies, and really got the data into shape where it could be shared more broadly. So it's kept in our Dataverse instance, which is our open data repository. Next slide. So these are just some sample variables that if you were to go to the information data set that you could find. It includes things like month, day, and year, other newspapers that these notices might have been put in, names, gender. There's also a lot about profession, sometimes both back in Ireland and in the US. There's some really interesting work that you can do around labor there. And the code book is actually fairly long. So this is just a subset, but it gives you an idea of some of the types of data that you can work with. Thank you. So just to recap, the overall project goals that we were looking at were to really try to introduce history students, but actually students across the humanities and social sciences we think could benefit from this, to the types of humanities data that they might encounter in their own research. Because as I said, sometimes students aren't always even aware that they're working with data, and there is a little bit of data literacy work that has to be done. We wanted to also introduce them to some commonly used digital scholarship tools and methods, and we'll show you some of those. And then, of course, we want to encourage deposits of research data into our repositories. So whether that is the data sets themselves or any research that we can put into our institutional repository, we definitely want students to be aware of that and to be thinking about that with their own work. And I believe here I'm turning it back over to Jaibe.
Thank you, Sarah. So after we know more about this data set, let's take a closer look at what we did in this project. So basically, we want students in humanity with exposure to the different components related to data literacy. And of course, the first part will be the data acquisition. So as Sarah introduced, we already have the information wanted data set deposited in the Dataverse. So for students, they already have a solid foundation to get started with, because we already have over 5,000 rows in this data set, and they can start working on that data set by themselves. But when they are looking at this data set, what they need to learn is how to read a code book along with their data set. They need to understand the variable names and the description and find the specification information in that spreadsheet. And also, we are thinking that when students are looking at the data set, they might also be interested in some data or statistics outside. For example, the US Census provides a pretty robust historical statistic of United States, and students might be interested in some demographic data out there. And also, because this data set is already deposited in Dataverse, so students do not need to do the OCR by themselves, but we also feel it will be a good chance to include the OCR component in this project as well. So we are going to look at the details in the next few slides. So for the outside, for example, like for the outside historical statistics, when students are researching the immigrants information during that period of time, they will need to go to the census website and then look for the population and the immigration information, and go through several tables to look for the immigrants by country to identify the information of European immigrants. And for the OCR component, because Boston College Library already has a digitized collection of Boston Pilot, so we find it's a good chance for us to introduce one text recognition tool for students. We use the transcript bus in this project, and the students will be able to download this free tool on their desktop and try converting the scanned newspaper to digitize the text by themselves. So this is one component.
5-minute warning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I was just giving you your 5-minute warning. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And also, for after the students have collected all the information they need, they will go to the data manipulation part. Sometimes they need data cleaning, control the vocabulary, and the data aggregation. So, for example, like when we are looking at data sets, you'll find the information like departure city actually has a lot of inconsistency. So students will need to use the tool in Excel to identify the inconsistent information and make corrections of it. And also, for example, when we have the occupation information in our spreadsheet, you'll find for the shoe making or clothes making, there are actually a lot of variations. So when we are thinking of, we want to do a bubble chart of the occupation industry that all the individuals in this data set, you probably need to identify all the variation of one industry and make correction by yourself, and eventually probably make some bubble chart of the industry that the individuals belong to. So this is another example. And also sometimes we find students might need to work as a team. So for example, one student is in charge of the making the US occupation information. The other student is responsible for the demographic, for the geographic information of the people. So eventually they will need to combine these two parts into one. So in this part, we will going to introduce the importance of ID information in the data set and let them try merge two parts into one in this practice. And of course, when the main part in this project is we will let students to have chances to try different visualization in this project. And our considerations are we want students to be able to expose to a variety of visualization tools like maps, charts, and network visualization, and the story map. But at the same time, we are also aware that students with humanities background don't have too strong technical skills. So we avoid any coding environment but choose all the tools with spreadsheet driven. And also we give them a choice of different tools which means that students will be able to choose the tools based on the skills level it requires. So basically we have Excel, Tableau, Void, Gephi, and Timeline for the different types of for the visualization in this project. And Excel is mostly used for the data processing, Tableau is for visualization, Void is for text analysis, Gephi for network, and Timelines for story map. And now let's just go quickly through some examples we made for this project. We have this Tableau visualization of the demographic information. So as you can see, we will be able to not only use the information from the information wanted spreadsheet, but also utilize the information we collected from the United States historical statistics. So in this chart, you'll see the comparison between the demographic and between the population during that period and with the people with the Irish immigration. So this is one visualization. And also we used the mapping function in Excel. So a lot of people, they hesitate to visualize their information on map because they don't know there are other tools available there that can actually visualize their information on the map. And in the Excel 2016 new version, there actually a mapping function, you will be able to easily visualize your information by the name of the place on your in the spreadsheet look. And also we include some visualization which require higher data skills, but also we just want to show them there's possibilities that you will be able to use this data set for making very fancy charts. So for example, this Sankey chart that students need to manually create the from and the arrival notes for this chart. But after this visualization is completed, students will be able to see the flow changes in the specified. Thank you. And also for the last part, we thought the story map will be a good chance to consolidate all the visualization for students who have made. The students will be include the visualization, the research text, the image or YouTube video, anything they find interesting related to their research project, and consolidate in their story map timeline for their final presentation. So we've come through a lot of tools in this project, and I want to say that this is a project we are still, it is still under development. We are still adding more visualization in our guide. So if you are interested in what we are doing, please feel free to explore our LibGuide page. And we have 4 of us are here for the questions.
Thank you so much. Your presentation was engaging. Again, a reminder to put questions in the Q&A and not the chat so I can catch them all. It looks like we've got one already, and that is, how did you recruit history students for this project?
Hey, I am one of the historians involved in the project. We have actually not recruited the students yet. This is partially in development because Boston College is just starting a digital certificate for the humanities, at the graduate level, and we will be having our pilot for introductions to digital scholarship in the spring semester. So this is part of the background for developing that class and actually having samples so students know what we're talking about.
Yeah, also, hi, Jen. It's good to see you virtually. I should mention, so there were students who entered the data through a Google form, basically, and probably before that through a different type of spreadsheet. But that was a number of years ago, and I think that professor had some sort of funding for some student assistance. It may have also been through classes as well.
Awesome. I'm sure you'll have many students that are going to be very interested in working with you all. So good luck on that. I don't see any more questions in this moment, but we still have a few more minutes. So we'll see if any more roll in.
Hey, Melissa, this is Mandy. You're one of your, fellow people. Because I'm a panelist, I can't put something in the Q&A, so I'm just going to ask verbally if that's
Go
okay.
for it.
So I was just curious, were there certain things that you felt like the students had particular challenges with, and how much do you think that was tied to being in backgrounds that may not have been as, data heavy, having not taken statistics classes and things like that? So if there's, a couple things that you might reflect on, I'd be curious. Thank you.
What I often find with students with this is that a lot of people in the humanities, and I work almost exclusively with historians, is that they don't even know what you mean when you talk about digital scholarship or digital humanities. There's no conceptualization. You say those words and people just blank. So part of the goal of this project is to provide visualizations as a base level to promote discussion and let students know what's even theoretically possible.
All right, looks like we've got a few more questions in the chat. One is, can you share to your LibGuide?
One.
We're able to pop that into the chat. Oh, there it goes. Thanks, Erin. And then another from Doreen. Do you know of other newspapers around the country that also had the same type of information, maybe NYC?
That's a really good question. Offhand, I don't, but I feel pretty certain that there are others out there somewhere. I think NYC would be a good place to look. Yeah, B, are you aware of any other types of information-seeking newspaper ads in the US?
Generally, yes, but not this concentrated. So you get a lot of this, this is information wanted is a subset of a classified section, and pretty much in classifieds across the United States, you will get requests like this, but not necessarily so clearly tagged that this became a central hub for finding information like this at all. But that said, I have not done a careful survey. I just know that I see this kind of advertisement.
Great, thank you. I think that was the last question we had time for. So thank you so much.